Welcome to the daily briefing from interest.co.nz. I'm David Chaston. Today we look at the latest birth rate, death rate and infant mortality figures for New Zealand. We'll review the latest social benefit numbers and we'll introduce Dr. Neville Bennett's latest opinion piece. Finally, we'll wrap up with what the other media are reporting. New Zealand averaged 2.1 births per woman in the September 2007 year. This level of fertility was last reached in 1992. Although this represents an increase from recent years, the rate has been relatively stable at around 2 births per woman over the last 20 years. In contrast, during 1948 to 67, women averaged 3.8 births, with the birth rate peaking at 4.3 in 1961. What is probably concerning public health officials is that our infant mortality rate is not declining. While it is fairly low, it is clear that little progress is being made in getting the incidence of infant mortality down to better levels. Infant mortality shows the same seasonal pattern as the overall death rate, with considerable more people dying in the September quarter than at other times. Generally, it has to be disappointing that our relatively mild climate and seasonal changes should have such an impact on people's survival rates. The Ministry of Social Development publishes quarterly data on the number of working age people who are on a benefit, and the latest data released is for the September quarter. All up, there are currently 263,000 people claiming a monetary benefit who are of working age. The latest Household Labour Force survey from Statistics New Zealand shows there are 3.3 million people of working age, so a little over 8% of them are on a benefit. While more than 75,000 people were counted as unemployed as of September, only 23,000 of those were claiming the unemployment benefit. 49,000 were claiming the sickness benefit, 78,000 the invalid's benefit, and another 96,000 the domestic purposes benefit. The current 8.1% on benefits compares with 8.8% a year ago. 5 years ago, that level was over 11.5%. It is a suitable time to take stock on what has occurred in the past 3 hectic months of gyrating stock markets, large interest rate cuts in the US, and massive releases of liquidity by all the major central banks. The credit crunch may not be over, but there have been sufficient changes in market conditions for all investors to reflect. In a world that has become much more risk-averse, the high levels of debt we have assumed and the high proportion that we owe to offshore lenders are adding significantly to our exposure to risk. One important impact on New Zealanders is that borrowers for anything other than mortgages are now facing very tough conditions. Lenders are able to choose only the best, lowest risk opportunities. Many projects that used to get funded in 2006 no longer can attract finance. The standards have shifted to a new, tougher level. Investors will have noticed a gratifying rise in returns offered. This time last year, the best bank 1-year term deposit rate yielded 7.65% and inflation was at 3.55%, leaving a real return of 4.1%. Today that best bank rate is 9% and inflation is 1.8%, with a real return well over 7%. That's an improvement that's getting close to have doubled in 12 months. The local consequences of the international credit crunch have been a fierce toughening of credit standards and a sharp rise in costs and returns. You can read Dr. Bennett's review by following the links on this website. And finally today, a wrap up of some other items of interest. 2 of Britain's biggest banks this week lost $8 billion due to their exposure to the US and UK housing crisis and related credit crunch, soothing fears of even bigger losses but failing to dispel worries among investors. They're worrying about $80 million a day in losses. A further 2 finance companies associated with the 5-star consumer finance group have collapsed, owing investors almost $70 million. Fonterra is in the news a lot recently as it works to build support for its capital base reorganisation. We really do need Fonterra to become New Zealand's Nokia, a world-scale business leader. Unfortunately, that is never going to happen with any other company given the restrictions imposed on our private sector by government. But Fonterra had an advantage in that it grew up with government support and got big internationally by being exempted from local competition law. But let's hope the final result is not that it effectively gets taken over by the government and the sovereign investment funds it controls. You can get more news and start with Newsmaker Views on our news page. Join us again tomorrow for the freshest finance news on the web. We'll see you then.